Here we go. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. I appreciate y'all. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the thumbs up, hit the notification, hit the ding ding. Remember your ancient past. Geometries that surround the body. Here we go with the next adventure. We've now seen how the geometries unfold in conception. We saw how we started with a little cube of 8 cells, which became the center of our bodies. Now I want to look at the geometries outside the body. The way the angels explained it to me is the way I'm going to give it to you. This begins when I was in Boulder, Colorado, sometime between 1976 and 1978. I can't pinpoint it for sure. I was living in a communal home with a bunch of friends and had my own bedroom. One night, the angels came in with a new teaching for me. They showed me the geometries by projecting glowing forms in space. It would be like hieroglyphics, holographics images that would appear maybe 7 or 8 feet away from me, and I'd work with them from there. In my room, the angels showed me this image of a circle and a square, figure 7 to 20. They said they wanted me to find this image in Metatron's cube, 7 to 21. Then they said goodbye, and I left, leaving me with no real instructions on how to proceed. After they left, I figured this wouldn't be too hard because they were always giving me little things to do. I'd do them, wait for them to come back, then they'd give me something else to do. I figured it wouldn't take long, but as I found out, it wasn't that easy. At least 4 months went by. At least 4 months went by, and I still couldn't figure it out. The way I see it, the angels intervened directly to help me with this. I was sitting there in my room one night around 9, and the floor covered with drawings. I used my floor as a table because I had so many drawings. My door was closed, and I was sitting there studying my drawings, trying to solve the problem the angels had given me. I had so many drawings you wouldn't believe it, trying to figure out where the circle and the square were in Metatron's cube. In those days, I didn't tell anybody what I was doing. I didn't tell people for a long time because it was a very personal experience for me. Quite frankly, nobody was interested anyway. Nobody cared about geometry back then because it had not merged into most people's consciousness as it has now. The Masonic key to squaring the circle. Someone knocked on the door. I opened my bedroom door, and here's this tall guy standing there. I had never seen him before in my life. He looked kind of sheepish, and he said, "I was supposed to come here to tell you some things." I asked his name and more about what he wanted. "Well," he said, "I was sent here by the Masons to tell you about the circle and the square." This really jolted me. I sort of froze in my my bookmark. I sort of froze in my tracks and just looked at him for a moment, trying to understand how this was happening. Then I figured I didn't really care how it was happening, only that it was. I just grabbed him by the hand and said, "Get in here," pulling him in and closing the door. I said, "Anything you have to tell me, I want to know what it is." So he drew this drawing, figure 7 to 72, 7 to 22. First, he drew the square, then he drew the circle around the square in a particular way, and there was the image I had seen glowing in my room. I thought, this is going to be good. He divided the square into 4 sections, then he drew diagonals from the corners through the middle to the opposite corners. Then he drew diagonals through the 4 smaller squares. Then he drew lines from I to E and E to J. Next, he drew lines from I to H and H to J, E and H being the points on the circle's circumference where the vertical center line intersects it. Up to this point, I'd had no problem, but then he drew a line from A to nowhere, G, and back to B, and from D to nowhere, F, and back to C. I said, wait a minute, that isn't in the rules I was given. That doesn't fit. There's nothing there. And he said, it's okay, because this line AG is parallel with that line IH, and this line DF is parallel to this line JE. Well, I said, that's a new rule. I didn't have that one before. I mean, there's nothing there. Parallel lines? Well, okay, I'll listen. Then he began to tell me all kinds of things. He said that the first key is that the circumference of the circle and the perimeter of the square are equal, which is what I told you before. This circle and square is the same image seen from the air as that of the Great Pyramid with the ship sitting on top. The pi ratio. He began to tell me about the pi ratio of 1.618, rounded here to 3 decimal points. The pi ratio is a very simple relationship. If you had a rod and you were going to put a mark on it somewhere, only 2 places would mark the pi ratio, shown as point A and B in his illustration, figure 7 to 23. There are only 2 places, depending on which end you're coming from, shown on lower drawing. It's a relationship such that if you divide D by C and E by D, the 2 answers will be the same, 1.618. So you divide the longer portion by the shorter portion, and that gives you the ratio 1.618. When you divide the whole length of E by the next shorter portion, which is D, you'll get the same ratio. It's a magical place, even though I was studying mathematics in college when this incident took place. The pi ratio somehow had gone over my head. I didn't get it. I had to go back and restudy all this stuff. This guy also brought up Leonardo's drawing with the circle and the square around it, giving me more information, which I'll tell you later. I asked him many questions, and about half the time he didn't know the answers. he'd just say, "That's the way it goes," or "I don't know. We don't know that." Though I can't say this for certain, I suspect the Masons have lost a great deal of their information. I think that they once had a brilliant knowledge that was very much like the Egyptians, and both of those declines have gone downhill. Before we left, he drew the sketch at the bottom of his diagram, see figure 7 and 22, with a square and the right eye of somebody. I can't say Horus because I don't know who it is, and then left. I've never seen him since. I don't even remember his name. Random Masons just dropping in, giving Melchizedek information. Okay. Applying the key to Metatron's cube. This gentleman from the Masons didn't answer the question specifically how the circle and the square fit into Metatron's cube. In fact, I don't think he'd ever seen Metatron's cube, but something he said triggered something in me so that I understood that what it was. Right after he left, I knew the answer. As you know, Metatron's cube is really a three-dimensional object, not a flat object. Three-dimensionally, Metatron's cube looks like this, figure 7 to 24. It's a cube within a cube, three-dimensionally. Then if you rotate it to this view, figure 7 to 25, you have its square aspect. Six-pointed. Once you do that, you have figures 7 to 26. At this point, you can drop the outer aspect. All you need are just the original 8 cells. Around those 8 cells, there's already a sphere, the zona pellucida. The cells are in the shape of a cube. So if you draw both a circle and straight lines around it, you get the image of the circle and the square the angel showed me. I was happy. The two concentric spheres. But then I calculated the perimeter of the square and the circumference of the circle, and they were not equal. I was bummed out for a long time because I figured I hadn't found it. About 3 years later, I discovered that I had found it, but had just not understood. In square geometry, when you find something that appears incorrect or breaks the idea you're trying to form, you have to keep going deeper because often you just don't have the whole picture yet. What I discovered was that the zona pellucida has a thickness to it. There's an inner surface and an outer surface. Every membrane has an outer and an inner surface. And when you use the outer surface of the zona pellucida, the proportions go into a near perfect pi ratio. The amount of perfection is actually part of the equation. You'll know what that means in a while. This is why there are two lines around the flower of life, the inner and the outer circles of the zona pellucida. So from now on, whenever you see 4 circles in a square, we're talking about the egg of life, the original 8 cells. Just take it for granted. Wow, that's like, I'm like trying to understand it too. Like, what the hell? That's crazy. So in this drawing, figure 7 to 27, I drew in all the lines that the Masons drew just to see how they would line up and what would happen. comparing the mason's drawing to the 8 cells. Nothing appeared to be happening in the middle of the drawing that I could see, though I suspected something at this point, which had to do with a circle that would just fit in the middle of the 4 spheres. But I did discover that the corners of the square, a cube, actually define the exact centers of the outer layer of the cells in the 16 cell division as at point A. This was an interesting observation, so I began to doodle and study further to see what they meant. Obviously, the angels wanted me to go down this road, but I had no idea where this road led. Studying the Vinci's canon, studying the Vinci, Da Vinci's canon. I decided to look deeper at this drawing of Leonardo's 7 to 28. I had also majored in art, so I had studied much of Leonardo's work, but I didn't realize until later how much artwork he had done. This drawing has become probably one of his most famous works. It perhaps even more important to us than the Mona Lisa or any other famous work of this. This kind of drawing, a standard for something, in this case, a standard for human beings, is called a canon. A human canon. The first thing that struck me about this drawing is how amazingly well all attuned to it. We all attune to it. For instance, because there are 30 frames per second that come across on a video, you could flash this drawing of Leonardo's for just an instant, yet people would immediately recognize it. We know something there is important. Perhaps we don't know what exactly what it is, but we still retain the image. There is a tremendous amount of information about us in this drawing, but as it turns out, it's not really about us. It's about who we used to be, not about who we are now. To begin this analysis, notice first that there are lines drawn over the arms and the trunk, across the chest and over the legs and neck. The head is divided into another series of lines. Notice that the feet are drawn at both 90 degrees and 45 degrees. Subtle things. Also notice that if you were to stand with your arms straight out and your legs straight down, a square or cube forms around your body. As in Leonardo's drawing, the center of that square is located exactly where the original 8 cells are, which is also square or cube. In the center of your body, notice the small cube around younger cells and the bigger cube around your adult body. When you are standing with your arms outstretched like Leonardo's man, there is a difference between the height and the width of your square. Computers have shown by measuring 100 people or more that there is 1/10,000th of an inch difference between the width of your outstretched arms and your height, though I couldn't understand for a long time why the difference was there. I didn't know now. I think I know now. It has to do with the Fibonacci series, which life is based on. You will see this shortly. If you put your hands out to the side like the other outer legs on Leonardo's drawing and stretch out your arms like the upper arms, A perfect circle or sphere fits around your body, and its center is located exactly at the navel. When you do that, the circle and the square exactly touch at the bottom. If you were to move the center of the circle down to the center of the circle and the square would synchronize just like they do in the Mason's drawing. And the drawing that shows the warship superimposed over the top of the Great Pyramid. It is a major secret of life. Yeah, like I just read like today. I was gonna put it to this video too, and probably make a short about it. But um, they basically using this nano cell. They're calling it the flower or something. It's basically like this, the flower of life pattern, but it's basically is stopping people from aging, and it's revitalizing their mitochondria. You're using like think like a frequency, I think, but I gotta break down the article and then like probably do a short and stuff. But basically, they're revitalizing aging mitochondria, and then those mitochondria will help the other ones revitalize the skin cells and all this stuff, and they're calling it the flower of life or something. Basically, you know, like they know like a pattern. The pattern is just like a blossom. It's like a spiral. So it's like crazy. It's really happening right now. Like these people are using genetics to prolong their life, and you know, and even the ascended masters, they don't need all this like technology, but they do it like naturally, you know. When you measure almost all the copies of Leonardo's drawing, you find that the circle is really on an really an oval, and the square is really a rectangle. It's different in all of them because they've been copied and folded so many times. But in the original, accurate drawing, the hand length from the wrist length to the longest finger equals the distance from the top of the head to the top of the circle when the two centers are aligned. This same length shows up between the navel and the center of the square. So when you bring the two centers together, everything aligns. Perfect alignment. Pi ratios in the human body. As I was discovering this, I thought, we have these geometry forms that appear to be outside the body as well as inside it. One of the things the angel said, which really stuck with me, was that the human body is the measuring stick of the universe. That's absolutely everything in the universe can be measured and determined from our bodies and from the energy fields around them. Since the pi ratio seemed to be such an important aspect to the Mason, and since we went on and on about it, I wanted to see where it was in the human body. I discovered it, and of course, other people have also discovered it. Realize that in figure 7 to 29, the squares shown in the square around the body, as in Leonardo's drawing, and that the line dividing the square in half is the center line of the human body. Also notice that the line B is not only the diagonal of one half of the square, but is also the radius of the circle. Now, if you are interested in the math, see figure 7 to 30, which proves that the ratio is found in the geometrical energy fields around the body. In at least this one relationship, there are many, many other pi relationships in and around the body. As you can see, the pi ratio equals 1/2 plus what's that symbol called? Radical 5 divided by 2 If you put this into your computer, you will see the transcendental number of pi continue until your computer runs out of memory. I know most of you out there don't care, but I've presented this information for the few. By the way, I'll just throw this out to you. When you're studying scalar geometry, you'll find that diagonals are one of the major keys for extracting information from your forms. In addition to shadows, expanding from 2 to 3 dimensions, comparing male to female, and so on, it never fails. I believe it was Buddha who asked his disciples to complete their navels. Whoever it was, I began to realize as I studied that there was more to the navel than meets the eye. Then I found a medical book whose authors must have also listened to Buddha, because they did a tremendous amount of research on navels. What the geometry show is that in the ideal, the navel sits at the pi ratio between the top of your head and the bottom of the feet. This is what most books indicate. The author found out that when a baby is born, its navel is in the exact geometrical center of the body. Both male and female babies start out this way. And as they grow, the navel starts to move towards the head. It moves up to the pi ratio, then continues upward. Then it comes back down to below the pi ratio, oscillating during the formative years. I don't know what the ages are, but these moments and locations happen at specific ages. It never actually stops at the perfect pi ratio in either male or females. But if I remember correctly, the male navel ends up slightly above the pi ratio and the female navel just below it. If you average the male and the female points, you get the perfect pi ratio. So even though Leonardo's drawing is of a male, it assumes that it is at the pi ratio, but of course in nature it would not be. Da Vinci figured out that if you draw a square around the body, then a diagonal from foot to extended fingertip, then draw a parallel line, another one of those parallel lines from the navel horizontally over to the side of the square. That horizontal line intercepts the diagonal line exactly at its pi ratio, figure 7-31, as well as that of the vertical line from head to feet. Assuming it's at the perfect point, not slightly above for females or slightly below for males. This means that the human body is divided into pi ratios from top to bottom, which we started earlier. If these lines were the only places in the human body where the pi ratio is located, it would probably be just an interesting fact. But the truth is, the pi ratio is located in thousands of places throughout the body, and it is not just a coincidence. Here are some obvious pi ratio locations in the human body, figure 7-32. The length of each bone in the fingers has a pi ratio to the next bone, as shown in the lower drawing. The same pi ratio occurs with all your fingers and toes. This is a somewhat unusual relationship because one finger is longer than the other in what appears to be an arbitrary fashion, but it's not arbitrary. Nothing in the human body is. The distance on the fingers marked A to B to C to D to E are all in a pi ratio, as well as the lengths of the phalanges F to G to F. Excuse me if that sounds outrageous. If you compare the length of the hand to the length of the lower arm bone, it has a pi ratio, just like the length of the lower arm bone compared to the upper arm bone. Or take the length of the foot to the lower leg bone, or that bone to the thigh bone, and so on. This is the pi ratio. The hip bone connected to the thigh bone. That's what kind of that's what it was like sounding like to me right now. This pi ratio is found throughout the entire body structure in all kinds of places and ways. It's usually at places where something bends or changes direction. The body also does it through proportionate sizes of one part to another. If you study this, you will be continually amazed. Figure 3 to 33. Excuse me. I had a bunch of stuff right here that I just tipped over. It's another way of showing the pi ratio. You make a curve so that you can see how one curve is linked with another, and you can see all the cascading pi ratios of the human body. This is from The Power of Limits by Georgi Dokzi. Okay. I highly recommend this book. Notice that on this male he drew the line for the navel slightly above where the actual pi ratio is located. He knew about that, and very few people I have read understand it. I want to talk about the Greek statue. The Greeks were well aware of this understanding of pi ratio. So were the Egyptians and many other people in ancient times. When they created a piece of art like this, they were actually using both sides of the brain simultaneously. They were using their left brain to very carefully measure everything. I mean, really carefully. Not kind of or sort of. They were measuring to make sure that everything was exactly mathematically correct according to the pi proportion. To be as creative as they wanted, they were also using their right brain. They could put any expression on the face and have the statue hold anything they wanted. The Greeks combined the left and the right brain. When the Romans came in and took over Greece, the Romans knew absolutely nothing about square geometry. They saw the Greeks' incredible art and tried to duplicate it. But if you compare Greek art to Roman art after they conquered, or what? Yeah, I'm not good at algebra, but I want to be good at algebra. I was, math is just not my number one, but I do enjoy math when I do it. Like it's fun because you get to solve problems and it just breaks down, and you're like, oh, eureka! Conquered Greece. Roman art looks like it was done by amateurs because they were like thinking from the barbarian point of view, maybe the lower chakras. Even though Roman artists were really good at what they did, they just didn't know they were supposed to measure everything, that there had to be this kind of perfection for the body to look real. The pi ratio in all known organic structures. Pi ratio mathematics goes not only through human life, but through the entire spectrum of all known organic structure. You can find this in butterflies, figures 7 to 34, or dragonflies, where each little tail section is proportioned to the pi ratio. The length of the section of the dragonfly form pi ratios. The illustration was focusing on one thing, but you can also look where every little bend is in the leg, the length and the width. The butterfly effect. Yeah, this Mav, it's it's not for the lighthearted. The length and the width of the wings, the size of the head compared to its width and length, everything. You can go on and on and on. You'll keep finding the pi ratio everywhere you look. Sorry, I'm trying to get better at my breaking, pausing with the, wording. Look at this rock skeleton, figure 7 and 36, and see how every single bone is in the pi ratio patterns, just like in the human body. Fish, I think, are really incredible because fish don't look like they have any pi ratio stuff going on, and there are so many different kinds, but when you realize them, the pi ratio is there as well. The dragonfly. Yeah. And then you make artificial life, design them like these, how they have the surveillance, whatever, dragonfly surveillance, fake fish, fake frogs, like what the heck's going on here? Insects to spy on you, or what? Insect wars, micro wars or something. All right. The other universal measurements you'll find, one I talked about before, is 7.23 centimeters, the wavelength of the universe. You'll find this wavelength scattered through the body, such as the distance between your eyes, but the pi ratio occurs more often than any other. Once a measurement of any species has been determined, then every other measurement in that species follows in the pi ratio proportion. To put it another way, there are only certain possibilities in a human structure, and once the size of one part of the body is determined, that determines the size of the next, and on and on. Soon I'll show you the Egyptian building that Lucy Lamy reconstructed just by measuring one little piece of rubble. This is how she did it. Once she knew the size of the first pi ratio. It's like when they reconstruct stuff, and like when they do it in the meta or whatever, they make reconstruction videos. Like they know how every block was and every piece, and like what the heck? Like that's so crazy, huh? When they put stuff back together. So I think I'm probably gonna read until this last paragraph and stop there. And this video is going on, and luckily I wasn't talking in between that much because it would have went on even longer. So here we go. Peace. She knew that every shape after that would relate to it in pi ratio. The pi proportions are built into this Japanese pagoda architecture, figure 7 to 38. This illustrates another point about creativity that I want to make. When they designed and built this structure, they carefully measured every single distance to match the various lines shown, and they carefully measured where to put each board, right down to that little ball on the very top, so that it could correspond with and form these relationships we have been studying. I'm sure if someone ever checks, they'll find that the size of the doors, the windows, and probably every small detail are all based on pi proportions or other square geometry. Our classical architect around the world used the same principles. The Greek Parthenon looks really different from this Japanese structure, but the Parthenon embodies the same mathematics, and the Great Pyramid looks very different from either of those two buildings, but it also embodies the same mathematics, only a lot more. What I'm saying is, your left brain can understand and use these mathematics, and it doesn't hinder creativity at all. It can even enhance it. So next would be golden mean rectangles and spirals around the body, right? So the ascended masters say once you're illuminated with all that light energy, you radiate gold energy, gold beams, and that's why they had gold, depicted with gold halos and gold rays, because that's the God connection with God. And they also said back in 1930 that they would create machines that can detect emissions, imminent, the emissions that we emit, our body, the light, and that's all true. Like the aura and stuff, and so yeah, we're going to that path, genetic, altered beings, genetically altered beings, and gold's gonna play a major part in healing the body and transforming it and creating the light beings and it's very interesting. Yeah, and so I read that thing about the flower of life, nano cells that rejuvenate the mitochondria, and that was very interesting to me. And also about like the chips in the brain and the data that they're going to be collecting, and it's going to be valuable for companies. Just like we're on the phone, they collect our data and stuff. So now this data is going to be like your mind data and all this stuff, and that's like even more valuable because it relates to different quantum fields and different information that it's all going to be put in the AI, and they're looking for something. So yeah, that's going to be a major issue in the future when everybody has their brain chips and all this stuff, and they're selling your data, they're selling your information, and they're selling your likeness and the AI clones and all this stuff, where you get scanned and cloned, and you upload your mind. And I think they're doing that illegally at certain places or certain devices and machines that they have set up. I think they're doing a major advance, things like that, picking up brainwave detections. And from my experience, like, I found out that, and by going to that rave and realizing that they were hitting me with the frequencies and making me basically snap and stuff, and turning me into basically hulking out. I'll call it like hulking out on juggernauts, and that's the thing in Captain America, that Marvel movie. It was all about that. Yeah, because on that thing about the nanocells, they're using the blood. How, like, I figured it all out. They're using the blood to send messages to frequencies for the gene to activate and whatnot, and they can basically do anything, turn you to like superhuman. With the frequencies, they hit you with the right frequencies, they elevate your body, like, so things like that are going on, and just be aware, and these things are gonna be right around the corner in a blink of an eye, blink of an eye, blink of an eye. So remember your ancient past.